She saw a woman who didn't belong. She saw natural hair, a carry-on bag from a discount airline, and hands that weren't weighted down with jewelry. She saw someone she could move, someone she could dismiss, someone whose complaint would go nowhere. What Gwendolyn Ashby Pratt, Senior Director of Guest Experience at the Harrington Grand Hotel in downtown Atlanta, did not see was the silver star tucked inside Colonel Nadia Osei-Thornton's personnel file. She didn't see the 2 combat deployments to Iraq, the recommendation letter from a 3-star general, or the fact that this woman had once kept 14 soldiers alive in a collapsed building for 9 hours with nothing but training, will, and a broken radio. Gwendolyn Ashby Pratt thought she was dealing with a woman who had wandered into the wrong lobby. She was about to find out she had wandered into the worst mistake of her career. The Harrington Grand was the kind of hotel that didn't advertise its prices because if you had to ask, you were already in the wrong place. Its lobby was a cathedral of Italian marble and curated silence, staffed by people trained to smile without warmth and exclude without language. The chandeliers cost more than most people's cars. The flower arrangements were replaced every 48 hours. The clientele was a specific kind of Atlanta. Old money, new tech money, politicians who liked to be seen, and executives who preferred not to be. Colonel Nadia Osei-Thornton arrived on a Tuesday in late October, the kind of morning where Atlanta's heat finally breaks, and the air smells faintly of someone's fireplace from 3 blocks away. She had just completed a 14-hour drive from Fort Campbell, Kentucky, where she had spent the last 3 years commanding a battalion of the 101st Airborne Division. She was on transition leave, a mandatory wind-down period before her official retirement from the United States Army, after 26 years of service. She was 51 years old. She wore no uniform that morning. She wore dark slacks, a neatly pressed blouse the color of slate, and low-heeled boots. Her natural hair was pulled back. She carried a leather weekender bag on one shoulder and a coffee she'd picked up from a gas station 40 minutes outside the city because she hadn't wanted to stop. She was staying at the Harrington Grand because her daughter, Imani, had insisted. Imani had booked the room herself as a retirement gift. 3 nights, the executive suite on the 14th floor. Nadia had protested. Imani had laughed. "Mama, you spent 26 years sleeping in the dirt. You're going to spend 3 days in a $400 a night hotel, and you're going to enjoy it." Nadia had relented. She was good at following orders from people she respected. She crossed the lobby toward the front desk, her boots quiet on the marble. The lobby was half full at this hour. A couple checking out near the concierge station, a man in a navy suit reading something on his phone, 2 women from what looked like a conference, gathering tote bags near the elevator. Nadia set her coffee on the counter, smiled at the young man behind the desk, and gave her name. He typed it in, frowned, typed again. His name tag said Andrew. "I'm seeing a reservation, but it looks like the suite isn't quite ready yet," Andrew said carefully. "Check-in isn't until 3, so..." "I understand," Nadia said. "I'm early. Is there a place I can wait? I've been driving since last night." "Of course. The lounge is just around the corner and excuse me." The voice came from behind her. Smooth, controlled, the kind of voice that had spent years learning how to interrupt without sounding like it was interrupting. Nadia turned. Gwendolyn Ashby Pratt was in her mid-40s, with precision-highlighted hair and the posture of someone who had decided decades ago that authority was something you wore like a jacket. She was dressed in a structured burgundy blazer, a hotel lanyard around her neck, a tablet tucked under her arm. Her eyes moved over Nadia the way a scanner moves over a barcode, looking for information, already forming a conclusion. "I can help from here, Andrew," Gwendolyn said, not to Andrew and not to Nadia, just into the air, as if she were addressing the general principle of the situation. Andrew stepped back, visibly relieved to be somewhere else. Gwendolyn set her tablet on the counter. She didn't smile. "Can I ask what the nature of your reservation is?" Nadia blinked. "I'm sorry, your reservation. Was it booked through a third-party site? Groupon, Priceline, one of those?" The question had nothing wrong with it on its surface. In tone, it was a guided missile. It was designed to establish where Nadia fit in the hierarchy of the hotel's clientele. It was designed to make her explain herself. "My daughter booked it directly through the hotel's website," Nadia said, keeping her voice level. Gwendolyn typed something. "And what's the name on the reservation?" "Osei-Thornton. Nadia Osei-Thornton." Another pause. Gwendolyn studied the screen with the focused attention of someone looking for a reason, not an answer. This suite was booked for 3 nights. Executive level. That's correct. That's a $1,400 a night room. Nadia set down her gas station coffee very slowly. I'm aware of the room rate. Gwendolyn looked up. The look was not hostile on its face. It was something worse. It was the professionally neutral expression of a person who has decided you are a problem but hasn't yet chosen her method. I just want to make sure everything is in order. We've had some issues recently with unauthorized card use on premium reservations. Are you suggesting my daughter's card was used fraudulently? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm following protocol. Your protocol doesn't appear to involve asking the man in the navy suit the same questions. A muscle in Gwendolyn's jaw tightened. Ma'am, I don't know what you're implying, but I'm simply doing my job. Then do it, Nadia said quietly. Run the reservation. Confirm the card. Give me a key to the lounge while I wait for the room. That is your job. Something shifted in Gwendolyn's expression. Not embarrassment, not recognition. It was the specific tightening that happens when someone used to deference encounters the absence of it. She didn't like the absence of it. She reached under the counter and produced a small printed form. I'm going to need a photo ID and the card used for the reservation. I don't have the card. My daughter booked it as a gift. That's not unusual. Our policy requires the card present or a signed authorization form from the cardholder. Nadia held her gaze. Is that policy listed on your website? It's in our terms of service. So your guests are expected to read 19 pages of terms of service. Before arriving to confirm they need to bring their adult daughter's credit card to check in to a gift reservation. Ma'am, I'd like to speak with the general manager. Gwendolyn straightened. I am the senior director of guest experience. I have full authority over. Then, I'll wait for whoever has authority over you. Nadia picked up her coffee and her bag. Point me toward the lounge. The lounge was off the main corridor, glass-walled, smelling of fresh espresso and leather furniture. Nadia found a seat facing the lobby entrance, opened the Notes app on her phone, and began documenting the time, the name she'd read off the lanyard, and a word-for-word account of the conversation, written in the precise, unemotional language of someone who had spent 2 decades writing incident reports in combat zones. She called Imani. Mama, you there already? I'm in the lounge. There was a situation at the front desk. Imani's voice changed in the way a daughter's voice changes when her mother uses the word situation with that particular flatness. What kind of situation? Nadia told her. There was a silence on Imani's end that was not the silence of shock but the silence of recognition. Imani was 31, a civil rights attorney in Washington, D.C., and she had heard versions of this story before, not always from her mother, often from her clients. I'm calling the hotel directly, Imani said. Don't move, don't escalate. You didn't come this far to get arrested in Atlanta. I'm not going to get arrested, Mama. I know, I'm sitting. Gwendolyn Ashby-Pratt was sitting at the front desk when her desk phone rang. She answered with her customary cool efficiency and said her name and title. The voice on the other end introduced itself as Imani Thornton Ellis, attorney at law, daughter of the guest currently waiting in the lounge, and asked her, very politely, to pull up the reservation and confirm the prior authorization form that had been submitted at the time of booking. Gwendolyn pulled it up. It was there. It had been there the whole time. A signed digital authorization with the cardholder's name, a copy of Imani's ID, and a confirmation code generated by the hotel's own booking system. There was a pause. Is there anything else missing? Imani asked. Gwendolyn said no. Then I'd like my mother to be given her key, an acknowledgement of the inconvenience, and the name of your direct supervisor, please. The key was cut within 3 minutes. Gwendolyn carried it to the lounge herself. She did not apologize. She said, your room won't be ready until 3, but we can offer complimentary access to our executive lounge and a dining credit for the inconvenience. Her tone was the tone of someone reading off a card, not making a human choice. Nadia accepted the key. She did not say thank you. She looked at Gwendolyn the way she had once looked at a subordinate who had falsified a supply report. Not with anger, but with a cataloguing stillness that was in some ways worse. I'll be in the lounge, she said, and she turned away. She had no idea that Imani had already done more than call the hotel. While Nadia sat in the lounge drinking what turned out to be genuinely excellent espresso and reading a novel she hadn't had time to touch in 3 years, Imani had opened her laptop in her DC office and begun composing an email. It was addressed to the general manager of the Harrington Grand, with courtesy copies to the hotel group's corporate director of diversity and inclusion, the regional VP of operations, and the organization's legal counsel. It was detailed, chronological, and written in the exact register that civil rights attorneys use when they are not yet filing suit, but want the recipient to understand that they could. At 11:47 a.m., the general manager of the Harrington Grand, a man named Russell Ford, read the email on his phone in the middle of a vendor meeting. He excused himself. He went to his office. He read the email again, this time on a larger screen. Then he called his director of HR. Then he called legal. Then he walked out of his office and personally went to find Gwendolyn Ashby-Pratt. He found her in a back office reviewing that afternoon's arrivals. "Tell me about the guest in 1404, he said. Gwendolyn told him her version. It took about 90 seconds. Ford listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "Did you know who she is?" "A guest," Gwendolyn said. Ford turned his phone around. On the screen was a results page from a Google search. The top result was a Department of Defense press release from 2019. There was a photograph, a black woman in army dress blues, standing at attention, while a general pinned a silver star above her breast pocket. The caption read, "Colonel Nadia Osei-Thornton, Battalion Commander, 101st Airborne Division, Air Assault, receives the Silver Star for combat valor during Operation Inherent Resolve, 2018. Below it was a second result, a 2022 piece from The Atlantic titled, "The Unseen Generals, Black Women Who Command in Silence." Colonel Osei-Thornton was quoted extensively. There was another photograph. She was wearing the same dark slacks and slate grey blouse she had on this morning. Gwendolyn stared at the screen for a long moment. "She's also the mother of Imani Thornton Ellis," Ford continued, his voice low and controlled. "Who is a civil rights attorney who has already emailed our corporate office, our legal department, and every diversity officer in the parent company's structure." He paused. "This morning." Gwendolyn said nothing. "She documented everything," Ford said. "Times, quotes, names. Gwendolyn, she wrote it down while she was sitting in the lounge. I was following protocol," Gwendolyn said. Her voice had lost some of its polish. Underneath it was something thinner. "The signed authorization was in the system," Ford said. "It's been in the system since the reservation was made 6 weeks ago. Our own booking platform generated it. You didn't look for it. You looked for a reason." He sat down across from her. He didn't look angry. He looked exhausted and precise. "I'm not here to have an argument with you about what you intended. I'm here because the parent company's legal team is going to call me in the next 20 minutes, and I need to know exactly what happened so I can tell them the truth." By 2 p.m., a settlement offer had been drafted. By 2:45, Gwendolyn Ashby-Pratt was placed on administrative leave, pending a full review of prior guest complaints, a review that, once opened, revealed 3 separate documented incidents over the previous 18 months, involving guests of color who had been subjected to elevated scrutiny at check-in under Gwendolyn's oversight, 2 of whom had submitted formal complaints that had been quietly resolved with dining credits and were never escalated. At 3 p.m., Russell Ford took the elevator to the 14th floor himself. He knocked on the door of Suite 1404. Nadia answered in the same clothes, having apparently spent the last 4 hours reading her novel and napping in the chair by the window with the city spread out below her in the October light. Ford introduced himself. He asked if he could come in. She said yes. He sat in the chair across from her. He apologized. Not the scripted apology of a hospitality professional managing an incident, but the specific, uncomfortable apology of a man who understands the weight of what he is saying. He told her what had been found in the prior complaint records. He told her what action had been taken. He did not ask her to keep it quiet. He did not offer her a free room upgrade as if that were a transaction that would balance the ledger. Nadia listened. She had spent 26 years listening to briefings. She was very good at separating the signal from the noise, the genuine from the performative. When Ford finished, she was quiet for a moment. "She's not the whole problem," Nadia said finally. "You know that." Ford nodded slowly. "I know that. Those 2 other guests, they took the dining credits and went home, and nothing changed until someone came in with a lawyer in the family." "Yes, that's what you need to fix," she said. Not unkindly, just clearly. Not her. The system that let it go 3 times before it had consequences. Ford looked at the floor and then back up. He looked like a man being talked to straight and finding it uncomfortable and valuable at the same time. "You're right," he said. "Nadia's daughter arrived at the hotel at 5 p.m. She came straight from the airport, a last-minute flight she'd booked the moment she'd gotten off the phone with the hotel's legal department. She burst through the suite door with the energy of someone who had been furious for 6 hours at 35,000 feet and walked directly into her mother's arms. "I had it handled," Nadia said into her daughter's hair. "I know you did," Imani said. "I just needed to be here." They ordered room service. They ate on the couch with the television on low. Imani told her about the legal strategy she'd outlined, the precedents she'd cited, the tone she'd struck. Firm but not litigious, the exact pressure that produces change without producing a counter-narrative about aggression. Nadia listened and felt the specific pride that comes not from watching your child succeed, but from watching your child become competent in a way that costs them something to sustain. The next morning, a local reporter who covered business and hospitality for the Atlanta Journal-Constitution received an anonymous tip about an incident at a major downtown hotel involving a decorated army officer. The tip included a name. The reporter ran the name. 40 minutes later, she was asking the Harrington Grand's PR contact for comment. The PR contact called Ford. Ford called legal. Legal had a conversation with Imani, who had by now filed a formal complaint with the Georgia Commission on Equal Opportunity. By Thursday afternoon, the story had been picked up by 3 national outlets. The Harrington Grand's parent company issued a statement expressing its commitment to equitable and respectful guest experiences across all properties, which is the corporate language. "For we are aware this happened, and we would like it to stop being news." The statement also confirmed that the senior director of guest experience had been placed on administrative leave while an internal review was conducted. What the statement did not include, but what became known through the course of reporting, was that the internal review had expanded. A third-party equity firm had been retained to audit check-in protocols across all 11 of the parent company's hotels, a mandatory implicit bias training program. Not the 45-minute online module that generates a completion certificate, but a 12-week engagement with actual accountability metrics had been contracted, and a guest relations position had been created on the executive team, specifically tasked with reviewing escalated complaints of discriminatory treatment, reporting directly to the CEO. The formal settlement between Imani Thornton Ellis's firm and the hotel group was never made public. What Nadia agreed to in that settlement was also never made public. What happened with that settlement, however, became known. A few months later, when the Harrington Grand's corporate offices received a letter from the Fort Campbell Community Foundation, acknowledging a donation made anonymously, attributed only to a family who preferred to remain unnamed, that would fund 3 years of college preparation programming for children of active duty military families living off base. The letter was dated the same week Nadia Osei-Thornton's military retirement became official. Nadia spent the 3 days of her gift reservation reading, sleeping, eating meals she hadn't cooked, and walking the streets of Atlanta in the October cool. On her last morning, she stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of Suite 1404 with a cup of the hotel's coffee in her hand and looked out at the city she'd grown up 40 minutes outside of, the city she'd left at 25 in army fatigues and would now return to for the first time in a quarter century as a civilian. Imani called at 7. "How do you feel?" she asked. Nadia thought about it. "Like I won something I shouldn't have had to fight for," she said. "Yeah," Imani said. "That's the right answer." Gwendolyn Ashby Pratt's administrative leave became a termination 6 weeks later, following the conclusion of the internal review, which documented a pattern of elevated scrutiny applied to guests of color under her management over a 4-year period. She contested the termination. Her attorney argued that the policy decisions had been management's, not hers alone. The hotel's legal team disagreed. The settlement of that dispute was also never made public. She found a new job eventually, a director-level position at a smaller boutique hotel group in another city, with a notably thinner resume and a reference letter that did not use the word exceptional. The hospitality industry has a long memory for names attached to national press coverage, which cuts both ways. The Harrington Grand's equity audit was later cited in an industry white paper as a model for systemic review. Gwendolyn Ashby-Pratt's name did not appear in the white paper. There is a version of this story where the woman in the lobby just takes the dining credit and goes home, where the complaint goes into a file, and the file goes into a drawer, and nothing changes except that 3 months later, someone else stands at that same counter, holding their ID, and feeling the specific, exhausting weight of being asked to prove they belong somewhere they've already paid to be. That version happens every day in lobbies and airports and restaurants and offices all over this country. It happens to people who don't have a civil rights attorney for a daughter. It happens to people who aren't decorated combat veterans with a silver star and a general's phone number in their contacts. It happens to people whose only credential is that they are a human being in a public space with the same rights as every other person in the room. Nadia Osei-Thornton won because she was prepared, because her daughter was fierce, and because the paper trail was undeniable. But the question that a few people in those comment sections always ask, the one that doesn't get answered by the settlement, or the firing, or the equity audit, is the quiet one. What about the people who weren't prepared? What about the ones who took the dining credit and went home tired? That's the part of the story that doesn't have a clean ending. That's the part we should still be angry about. If this story made you think about what respect looks like when no one's watching, about who gets the benefit of the doubt in rooms like that, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you believe in accountability that goes deeper than a firing, subscribe to Voices of Truth. We tell the stories that don't always make the headlines, and we tell them the way they deserve to be told, without flinching.